By Greece, 480 BCE. A king climbs the steps to the oracle alone. His name is Leonidas. He is 60 years old, king of Sparta, and he has come to ask one question. What will happen when Persia arrives? The oracle gives him its answer. Either Sparta falls, or a Spartan king dies. He walks back down the steps. He doesn't tell the council what he heard. He doesn't ask for more time. He goes home, calls his officers, and begins selecting 300 men for the march north. He does not choose the strongest. He does not choose the fastest. He chooses men who already have living sons. Every man he picks has a child who will carry his name forward. Every man he picks understands, without being told, what that selection means. He is not assembling a fighting force. He is assembling men who are already gone. 3 weeks later, 300 Spartans and several thousand allies are standing in a narrow coastal pass called Thermopylae. In front of them, the largest invasion force the ancient world had ever seen. What happened in that pass over the next 3 days changed the ancient world forever. This is what it actually took to stand there. Before a single Persian soldier reached Thermopylae, their king had already ordered the sea whipped. A storm had destroyed his bridges across the Hellespont, the narrow strait separating Asia from Europe. 2 pontoon bridges, nearly a mile long each, built from warships lashed side by side and planked over with timber and soil. Months of engineering, destroyed overnight by weather. Xerxes' response was not to rebuild and move on. He ordered 300 lashes delivered to the water for defying him. His men stood at the shoreline and whipped the sea until they had counted every stroke. Then he built new bridges. That is the man who was marching toward Greece. To understand why, you have to go back 10 years. Xerxes' father, Darius, had already tried to crush Greece. His army landed at Marathon in 490 BCE. His navy controlled the Aegean. The Greek city-states were divided, fractured, and weak. By every calculation, Greece was finished. Athens beat him anyway. An outnumbered Athenian force ran straight at the Persian line and broke it. The Persians retreated. Darius spent the rest of his life rebuilding for a second attempt. He died before he could finish it. His son inherited everything: the army, the empire, the ambition, and the grudge. Xerxes did not approach the second invasion the way a general thinks about a campaign. He approached it the way an empire thinks about a correction. He dug a canal through a peninsula to save his fleet weeks of sailing. He built supply depots across 2 countries. He assembled forces from 46 nations, soldiers who didn't share a language, didn't share a god, didn't share anything except the direction they were marching. Modern scholars estimate the army between 120,000 and 300,000 men. Even at the lowest estimate, Greece had never faced anything close to it. One kingdom after another sent their submission and stepped aside. The road to Greece was opening itself. Xerxes barely needed to fight. But at the end of that road, 2 cities were still standing, and they had already decided what they would do when he arrived. When Leonidas marched north, Sparta was celebrating. The Carneia, a sacred festival honoring the god Apollo, was underway. And Spartan law was absolute on this point. No military campaign could begin during a sacred festival. No exceptions, no debate. That same law had already cost Greece once. 10 years earlier, when the Athenians sent runners begging Sparta for help at Marathon, the Spartans had said yes, and then looked at the calendar. The Carneia was running. They waited. By the time they arrived, the battle was over. Athens had won it alone. Now the same festival was running again, and this time the enemy wasn't landing on a beach 2 days' march away. They were crossing a continent. The Ephors, Sparta's ruling council, faced a problem with no clean answer. The full army could not march. The law did not bend. But if they waited for the festival to end, the pass would already be taken. They gave Leonidas a compromise, not a mobilization, a forward force. Take the royal bodyguard, 300 men, march north immediately, reach Thermopylae, hold the pass, buy time for the festival to end and the full Spartan army to follow. It was a political solution to a military crisis, and Leonidas understood exactly what it meant, because he had already been to Delphi. He marched anyway. As the force moved north through the Greek countryside, allied contingents fell in beside them: Thespians, Thebans, Phocians, Corinthians, Arcadians, city-states that understood the same arithmetic Leonidas understood. If the Persian army reached southern Greece, there would be no southern Greece left. By the time the force reached the pass, it numbered over 7,000 men, not 300. The 300 Spartans were the spine. The others were the body around them. They entered the pass, rebuilt the wall, and took their positions at the middle gate. 7,000 men standing between the largest army on earth and the rest of Greece. The hot gates were closed. Thermopylae means hot gates, named for the sulfur springs that push up through the ground there. A smell like something ancient and volcanic, like the earth reminding you it was here before you and will be hereafter. In 480 BCE, the pass was a narrow corridor squeezed between a cliff wall on one side and the Malian Gulf on the other. At its widest point, barely 100 meters. At the middle gate, where Leonidas planted his line, almost nothing. Think carefully about what that does to an army of hundreds of thousands. Numbers only help you if you can put them on the field. In that corridor, you could fit roughly 50 men across. That was it. The rest of the army, tens of thousands deep, stood behind them, waiting, useless. Xerxes' cavalry had no room to charge. His archers couldn't volley into a line pressed chest to chest with their own men. The sheer mass that had made every other nation kneel, neutralized completely by a strip of rock and water. Leonidas had not stumbled into this position. He had chosen it precisely. He also knew about the mountain path above the pass, the Thermopylae Trail, a route through the hills that bypassed the Greek position entirely. Local people had told him it existed. He posted 1,000 Phocian soldiers on the heights to guard it, then turned his attention to the front. For 4 days after arriving, Xerxes did nothing. He sent a scout first. The Persian rider circled the Greek camp, observed, and rode back unharmed. His report confused the great king. The Spartans weren't drilling. They weren't sharpening weapons or building defenses. They were combing their hair, stretching, moving without urgency, as if nothing of consequence was approaching. Xerxes summoned Demaratus, an exiled Spartan king traveling with the Persian court, and asked what it meant. Demaratus looked him in the eye. When Spartans dress their hair, he said, they are preparing to risk their lives. Xerxes laughed. He sent an envoy with terms. Lay down your arms, keep your lives. Leonidas sent back 2 words. Molon Labe, come and take them. Xerxes waited 4 more days after the reply. He still believed they would come to their senses, that at some point a man would look at what was massed on the other side of that pass and simply walk away. The Greeks didn't move. On the 5th day, he attacked. He sent the Medes and Scythians first, 10,000 men. The The orders were almost insulting. Take them prisoner. Bring them before the king alive. The Greek phalanx met them at the narrowest point. Picture what the Persian soldiers saw when they entered that corridor. A wall of shields, overlapping edge to edge, sealing the passage completely. 8-foot spears angled forward in staggered rows. The front rank covered by the shields of the men directly behind them, so the men doing the killing were simultaneously protected by the men who weren't. The Persian line hit the Greek shields and stopped, completely, like water hitting stone. The front rank stepped back, not retreating, rotating. Fresh legs and fresh arms moved forward to replace them. There was no chaos in the Greek line, no shouting, no breaking of formation. It moved like a single organism, precise, cold, and without hesitation. The Medes broke. Xerxes sent more troops. Same result. He looked at his losses and made his next call. The Immortals, 10,000 of Persia's finest professional soldiers. Their name came from their system. When one fell, another immediately filled his place. The number never dropped. The force never shrank. On paper, they were unkillable. They had never failed. They entered the pass expecting to end it in minutes. The phalanx rotated. The spears held. The line didn't move. The Immortals fell back. For 2 full days, the greatest army the ancient world had ever assembled broke itself against a few hundred meters of Greek bronze. Xerxes reportedly stood up from his throne 3 times while watching, not in triumph, in horror. His mass was useless. His cavalry was useless. His elite were bleeding in a corridor they couldn't widen. Everything that had made him the most powerful man on earth meant nothing inside that pass. Nothing worked. Xerxes had the largest army ever assembled and still couldn't break through. What would you have done in his position? Let me know in the comments below. On the second night, a man walked into the Persian camp. His name was Ephialtes of Trachis, a local man, a Greek, someone who had grown up in the hills above Thermopylae and knew every path through them the way you know the streets around your own home. He came to Xerxes with an offer. He knew a way through. The Thermopylae Trail, a path curving high above the pass through the mountains, bypassing the Greek wall entirely, coming out directly behind Leonidas's position. No Persian scout had found it. No amount of force at the front would have revealed it. Only someone who'd walked it knew it existed. His motive was not ideology, not vengeance, not patriotism for Persia. He wanted the reward money. The Greeks remembered him. They placed a bounty on his head. He spent the rest of his life in exile, hunted across the region he had betrayed. He was eventually killed, not by a patriot seeking justice, but by a man with a personal grudge over an unrelated dispute. The Spartans honored the killer anyway. His name, Ephialtes, entered the language as something people still use today when they wake up gripped by something dark and formless in the night. Xerxes sent the Immortals up the path that night, thousands of soldiers moving through mountain terrain in darkness, guided by a traitor. At dawn, the 1,000 Phocians guarding the heights heard something. Not voices, not footsteps. The sound of oak leaves being crushed underfoot. The Immortals emerged from the tree line. Both sides froze for a moment. Then the Persians loosed arrows, not to destroy the Phocians, but to push through them. The Phocians pulled back to higher ground. The Persians walked past without stopping. The path was open. Leonidas received the news before sunrise. He called a council. Most of the allied contingents were ordered to withdraw, or chose to on their own. Over 4,000 men left the pass. They would fight again at Plataea. Their lives still had use. The 300 Spartans stayed. 700 Thespians refused to leave. Their city was directly in Xerxes' path. If the south fell, Thespiae burned regardless. They had no home left to march back to. They chose to die here, in a moment the world would remember, rather than later in one it wouldn't. Around 2,000 men total. They knew exactly what morning would bring. At dawn, Xerxes made his offerings to the gods. He waited for the immortals to descend from the mountain and close the trap from behind. Then he ordered the full advance from the front. 2 forces, moving toward the same position from opposite directions, no way out. Leonidas made one final decision. Instead of pulling his men behind the wall and waiting to be surrounded, he moved them forward, into the wider section of the pass, all of them, advancing, not holding, attacking. If they were going to die, they would die killing as many Persians as possible. They would not crouch in a corner and wait for the end. They would run at the empire with everything they had left. The Greeks pushed forward with such force that Herodotus records 2 of Xerxes' own brothers died in the fighting, cut down in the press of men, lost in the same corridor that had swallowed thousands before them. Leonidas was killed in that advance. Shot by Persian archers deep inside the enemy line, far beyond the wall he had been sent to hold. What happened next was one of the most ferocious passages in ancient military history. The Greeks fought to reclaim his body. They drove back the Persian line 4 times. 4 times they pushed into the enemy formation and took him back. Spears broke. Men kept fighting. Swords were drawn and used until they were gone too. And then, Herodotus writes this plainly without dramatization, they fought with whatever their bodies could still do. Historians who have studied this battle say what happened on that hill in the final minutes was no longer a military engagement. It was something older and more desperate than that. The immortals closed from the rear. The remaining Greeks, Spartans and Thespians together, fell back to a small hill behind the wall. Xerxes gave the final order. Persian archers covered the hill from every angle until the ground went still. Thermopylae was not a Greek victory. The pass fell. Xerxes marched south. Athens was evacuated and burned. The Acropolis looted and set on fire. By every military measure, this was a defeat. The ancient historians said it. The modern scholars agree. But something happened in that pass that the numbers don't capture. Xerxes was so furious at Leonidas that after the battle, he ordered his head cut off and his body crucified. Persians did not do this. They honored brave enemies as a point of cultural pride. The fact that Xerxes violated his own custom tells you everything about how deeply those 3 days had wounded him. The army that had never been stopped, that had crossed a continent and whipped a sea for defying it, had been held for 3 days by men who were already dead when they arrived. That is what moved through Greece in the weeks after the pass fell. Not just news of a defeat, a story. The story of a king who went to Delphi, heard his death sentence, and marched north anyway. Of men chosen because their sons existed. Of a line that didn't break until the mountain gave it away. City-states that had been ready to submit changed their calculations. The Athenians who had burned their own city rather than let Xerxes have it intact. That decision was made easier because Thermopylae had happened. 6 weeks later, the Greek fleet lured the Persian navy into the narrow strait at Salamis and destroyed it. The same logic Leonidas had used at the Hot Gates. Same geography, different water. Thermopylae didn't save Greece. but it gave a civilization the story it needed to believe it still could. The inscription placed on that hill by the poet Simonides within years of the battle said it plainly. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. 25 centuries later, those words are still on that stone. The empire that put them there is gone. Leonidas